The bright stars of the Kepler system had never seen warships before. Now 12 massive vessels hung in the darkness like metal giants. Their hulls gleamed with the purple glow of quantum shields, and plasma cannons pointed toward the small, human colony on the fourth planet. Admiral Vex stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the primitive world through the viewing screen. His four eyes studied the simple buildings and basic defense towers scattered across the planet's surface. After 47 conquests, this would be easy. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the planet," reported his communications officer. "Put it through," Vex commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. The screen flickered, showing a middle-aged human man in simple clothes. Governor Kane looked tired but calm as he spoke. "This is Governor Kane, of New Haven Colony. We know why you're here. We've heard about what happened to other worlds. We're not interested in joining your empire, but we don't want to fight either." Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "You speak as if you have a choice, primitive. I am Admiral Vex of the Dominion Third Fleet. You will surrender your world and submit to Imperial rule, or we will take it by force." Kane rubbed his forehead and sighed. "Admiral, I'm going to say this once, and I hope you listen carefully. We don't want to hurt anyone. We just want to live in peace. But if you force us to fight, you won't like what happens. Please think about this." The bridge crew around Vex began to chuckle. These humans were even weaker than expected. Their leader was practically begging. "Your warning amuses me," Vex said. "I have conquered worlds with weapons you cannot imagine. I have destroyed fleets that could turn your little colony to dust in seconds. What could you possibly do to threaten the might of the Dominion Empire?" Kane's expression didn't change. "We've been watching your ships for 3 days. Your quantum shields work by creating an energy barrier that deflects plasma and energy weapons. Very impressive technology. But Admiral, energy isn't the only way to destroy something." "Enough," Vex snapped. "You have 1 hour to surrender or we begin bombardment." The transmission ended. Kane's face disappeared from the screen. Vex turned to his weapons officer. "Begin scanning their defenses. Let's see what these primitives think will protect them." The scans showed exactly what Vex expected. The humans had built simple metal towers around their settlements. No energy shields, no plasma cannons, no quantum disruptors. Just basic railguns that fired metal projectiles using magnetic fields. Railguns? Vex's tactical officer couldn't hide his amusement. "Sir, they're using technology we abandoned 3,000 years ago." "Their ships are just as primitive," added the science officer. "Thick metal armor instead of shields, chemical rockets instead of quantum drives. They build everything heavy and slow." Vex nodded. "Prepare for standard bombardment pattern. Target their defense towers first, then their power stations. We'll show them what real weapons can do." The hour passed quickly. Right on schedule, Vex gave the order. "All ships, open fire." 12 Dominion cruisers lit up the darkness with brilliant plasma beams. The purple energy lanced down toward the planet, striking the human defense towers directly. That's when everything went wrong. The plasma beams hit the towers and simply disappeared. The energy was absorbed into the metal structure like water, into sand. The towers didn't even seem damaged. "What?" Vex stared at the screen. "That's impossible. Nothing can absorb that much plasma energy." Before anyone could answer, the human towers began to move. They rotated slowly, their long metal barrels pointing up toward the Dominion fleet. "Sir, they're targeting us," the tactical officer reported, his voice suddenly nervous. "Let them try," Vex said, but his confidence was shaking. "Our shields can handle anything they—" The first railgun fired. There was no bright flash, no colorful beam of energy. Just a small metal projectile, no bigger than a telephone pole, launched by magnetic fields at incredible speed. It hit Vex's flagship in less than 2 seconds. The quantum shields, designed to stop energy weapons, might as well have been made of paper. The metal rod punched through them like they weren't even there. It tore through the ship's hull, through 3 decks, through the engine room, and out the other side. Alarms screamed across the bridge as the ship shuddered and began to list to one side. "Shields down. Hull breach on decks 4 through 6. Engine power at 30%, the damage control officer shouted. More railguns fired from the planet's surface. Simple metal projectiles, but moving so fast they carried the energy of small nuclear bombs. The Dominion ships built for fighting energy weapons had no defense against solid matter moving at such incredible speeds. The cruiser Vengeance took a direct hit to its command section. The bridge exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The ship went dead in space. Another projectile clipped the destroyer Swift Death, spinning it like a toy and sending it tumbling out of formation. "Return fire, all weapons," Vex ordered. The Dominion fleet unleashed everything they had: plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, disruptor beams. The space around the human colony lit up like a small sun as enormous amounts of energy poured down toward the planet. The human settlements had shields after all, but not the kind Vex understood. Instead of energy barriers, they had built thick metal domes that absorbed and redirected energy. The plasma fire that should have melted their buildings instead powered their weapons. More railguns fired. The destroyer Night Terror simply disappeared. As a projectile hit its reactor core, the explosion lit up half the system. "Sir, we're being slaughtered," his tactical officer reported. 3 ships destroyed, 5 heavily damaged. Their weapons are penetrating our shields like they're not even there. Vex couldn't understand it. How could primitive kinetic weapons be so effective against advanced Dominion technology? On the planet's surface, Governor Kane watched the battle from his underground command center. Around him, his defense coordinators worked calmly at their stations. "Railgun Battery 7, good hit on their flagship," reported Defense Coordinator Mills. "Railgun Battery 3, you clipped that destroyer nicely." "Governor," said his science advisor, Dr. Webb, "their shields are designed for energy absorption and deflection, but kinetic energy is different. A solid object moving fast enough carries massive amounts of force. Their shields can't redirect that kind of impact." Kane nodded grimly. "It's basic physics. They forgot that sometimes the old ways work best." In space, Admiral Vex finally accepted what his sensors were telling him. His advanced fleet was losing to primitive weapons that his ancestors might have used. "All ships, retreat. Fall back to the outer system." The surviving Dominion vessels turned and fled, their quantum drives carrying them away from the deadly, accurate railguns. As the last enemy ship disappeared, Kane opened a communication channel to the retreating fleet. "Admiral Vex, if you can hear this, remember what I told you. We warned you, we didn't want this fight. Think carefully before you come back." In his damaged flagship, Vex stared at the communication display. For the first time in his career, he had been defeated. Not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by an enemy who understood war in ways he had never considered. The humans had been right about one thing. He didn't like what had happened at all. The throne room of Emperor Thane had seen many victory celebrations. Today it witnessed something new: defeat. Admiral Vex knelt before the golden steps, his uniform torn and his pride shattered. Around him, the Emperor's War Council whispered in disbelief. "Explain to me," Emperor Thane said slowly, his voice echoing through the vast chamber, "how 12 of our finest warships were defeated by primitive colonists." Vex kept his eyes on the floor. "Your Majesty, their weapons, they were not what we expected. Simple railguns, but firing projectiles at speeds we have never encountered. Our quantum shields were useless." General Mars, the Emperor's chief military advisor, stepped forward. "Impossible. Kinetic weapons are ancient technology. No civilized species has used them for thousands of years." "These humans are not civilized," Vex replied. "At least not in the way we understand. They fight like savages who have learned to use starships." Emperor Thane rose from his throne, his tall figure casting a shadow over the defeated admiral. "Bring me the prisoners. I want to understand what we're dealing with." 3 human prisoners were brought into the throne room in energy chains. They walked calmly, showing no fear despite being surrounded by armed guards. The leader, a woman with captain's stripes on her torn uniform, looked directly at the Emperor. "I am Captain Torres of the New Haven Defense Force," she said. "Are we here to talk, or are you planning to execute us?" The boldness shocked the assembled court. No prisoner had ever spoken so casually to Emperor Thane. "You will show respect," General Mars barked. Captain Torres shrugged. "Respect is earned. So far, your empire has only shown us that it attacks peaceful colonies. Not very impressive. Emperor Thane raised a hand to silence his general. He studied the human woman with interest. Tell me, Captain Torres, how did your primitive weapons defeat our advanced fleet? Torres smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. Your weapons are very advanced. I'll give you that. Plasma cannons, quantum shields, energy disruptors, very flashy. But you know what? They all follow the same basic rules. What rules? Asked Dr. Kryn, the Emperor's science advisor. Energy rules, Torres explained. Your shields absorb energy, redirect it or deflect it. Your weapons use energy to cause damage. Everything in your military follows energy-based physics. She paused, looking around the room at the confused faces. But kinetic energy is different. A big chunk of metal moving really, really fast doesn't care about your fancy shields. It just punches through everything in its way. Basic physics that apparently you've forgotten. General Mars stepped closer to the prisoner. Your people still fight with primitive weapons because you are primitive. The Dominion has evolved beyond such crude methods. Torres laughed, a sound that made several guards step back nervously. Evolved, is that what you call it? She said. Let me tell you something about humans, General. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. Not against aliens, against each other. Every weapon we build, every tactic we use, has been tested in real combat against other humans. She gestured to her fellow prisoners. Lieutenant Beck here has fought in 3 different wars before he was 30. Sergeant Cole survived urban combat on Mars. Me? I commanded a destroyer during the Belt Wars. We've all been fighting since we were old enough to hold weapons. Dr. Kryn leaned forward with interest. Your species still wages war among itself? We try not to, Torres admitted, but we're not very good at staying peaceful. Humans fight. It's what we do. We fight over resources, territory, ideas, sometimes just because we're bored. The throne room fell silent. The concept was alien to them. Most species in the galaxy had achieved peace within their own kind before reaching the stars. While you were building your empire by conquering weaker species, Torres continued, we were learning how to kill other humans. And humans are tricky, smart, and desperate when cornered. We had to get very good at warfare to survive each other. Emperor Thane returned to his throne, processing this information. So you are saying your entire species is militaristic? Not exactly, Torres said. We don't like war. Most of us want peace. But we're prepared for war because we know it always comes eventually. Every human child learns basic combat skills. Every human settlement has defense plans. Every human ship can fight if needed. She looked directly at the Emperor. We sent your admiral a warning. We've sent the same warning to 46 other species before you conquered them. We don't want to fight, but we will if we have to. General Mars scoffed. 46 warnings? Where were you when those species needed help? Torres's expression hardened. We tried to help. We sent messages offering alliance, trade agreements, mutual defense pacts. Every single species turned us down. They said we were too violent, too primitive, too dangerous to associate with. And then you conquered them anyway, added Lieutenant Beck quietly. The uncomfortable truth settled over the throne room. The Dominion had indeed conquered 46 species, many of whom had rejected human offers of alliance. Emperor Thane stood again. Guards, take the prisoners to comfortable quarters. They are to be treated well. After the humans were escorted out, the Emperor turned to his advisors. What do you think? Dr. Kryn spoke first. Your Majesty, if what they say is true, we may have seriously underestimated this species. A race that has spent millennia perfecting warfare would indeed be formidable. They're bluffing, General Mars insisted. No species could be that militaristic and still achieve spaceflight. They would have destroyed themselves. Or, said Admiral Vex quietly, they learned to control their violence enough to survive, but not enough to forget how to use it. The next day, a human ship arrived at the capital world under a flag of truce. Ambassador Reed, a stern woman in formal diplomatic attire, requested an audience with Emperor Thane. She was received in the smaller council chamber, accompanied by 2 guards and carrying a simple briefcase. "Your Majesty," she began without ceremony, "I come with a message from the United Human Colonies. We know what happened at Kepler. We know you've imprisoned our people. We're here to prevent this situation from getting worse." Emperor Thane leaned back in his chair. "You speak boldly for someone representing a species that just attacked Imperial forces." "We defended ourselves," Reed corrected, "after warning your admiral to leave us alone. Now I'm here with the same warning on a larger scale." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a data pad. "This contains detailed information about every species you've conquered in the last century. Communications logs, defense analyses, economic data. We've been watching your empire expand for a long time." The Emperor's advisors exchanged glances. How had primitive humans gathered such intelligence? "We sent messages to 46 species before you conquered them," Reed continued. "Offers of alliance, defense pacts, technology sharing. Every single one refused our help. They said we were too violent, too unpredictable." She set the data pad on the table. "Then you conquered them anyway, just like we warned they would be." "What is your point, Ambassador?" General Mars asked impatiently. Reed looked directly at Emperor Thane. "My point is simple. We don't want your empire. We don't want to conquer anyone. We just want to be left alone. But we won't be conquered, and we won't watch you destroy more innocent species." She stood up. "Stop your expansion now. Leave human space alone. Find a way to coexist peacefully with the species you've already conquered. Do this, and we can avoid a war that nobody wants." Emperor Thane considered her words carefully. "And if I refuse?" Ambassador Reed's expression didn't change. "Then you'll learn what 46 dead civilizations never had a chance to discover. Humans keep their promises, Your Majesty, both the good ones and the bad ones." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Captain Torres and her people should be released immediately. They were defending their home. Any civilized species would understand that." After she left, the throne room remained quiet for a long time. Finally, Emperor Thane spoke. "What do you think they meant about promises?" Admiral Vex, still recovering from his defeat, replied quietly. "I think, Your Majesty, that we're about to find out." The Emperor stared at the data pad the human ambassador had left behind. His empire had conquered 46 species in a century of expansion. He had never lost a battle, never faced real resistance, but he had never fought humans before. "General Mars," he said finally, "begin mobilizing the fleet. If these humans want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget." What Emperor Thane didn't realize was that humans had been preparing for exactly this kind of war for their entire history, and unlike the 46 species that had fallen before them, humans had a very long memory for those who refused to listen to warnings. 600 Dominion warships gathered at the edge of human space. It was the largest fleet the Empire had ever assembled, half of their entire military force. Emperor Thane had decided to crush the human rebellion once and for all. Admiral Vex stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds. His previous ship was still being repaired after the humiliating defeat at Kepler. This time, he would not underestimate the humans. "All fleet commanders report status," he ordered, into his communication device. One by one, the responses came back. 600 ships, 12,000 crew members, enough firepower to turn a planet into dust. The largest military force in Dominion history. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Aurora system. It's the humans." The main screen flickered to life, showing a middle-aged human man in a simple military uniform. Commander Blake looked tired, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "This is Commander Blake of the Aurora Defense Fleet. I'm broadcasting to all Dominion ships in our system. You still have time to turn around and go home." Admiral Vex laughed, bitterly. "Commander Blake, you are facing 600 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Your little colony has perhaps 20 ships. Surrender now, and we might let your people live." Blake rubbed his eyes and sighed. "Admiral, I've been in this business for 30 years. I've fought in 7 wars, commanded ships in 12 major battles, and I've never lost a single engagement. You know why? Enlighten me, Vex replied sarcastically. Because I only fight battles I can win, Blake said simply. And Admiral, you can't win this one. The transmission ended. Vex stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his fleet commanders. All ships attack formation, we end this quickly. The Dominion fleet moved forward in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with quantum shields and plasma weapons, charged to full power. It was a sight that had terrified 46 species into submission. The human ships that came to meet them looked like scrap metal compared to the elegant Dominion vessels. Only 18 ships, built heavy and ugly, with thick armor plating and crude weapon mounts. Sir, the human fleet is moving to intercept, reported the tactical officer. They're not using standard formation tactics. Vex studied the display. The human ships were spreading out in a seemingly random pattern, not following any military doctrine he recognized. It doesn't matter, he said. Open fire when we reach weapons range. The space between the two fleets lit up with plasma fire as the Dominion ships opened their attack. Brilliant beams of energy lanced across the darkness, striking the human vessels directly. The human ships didn't try to dodge. They took the hits on their thick armor and kept coming. Direct hits on all targets, reported the weapons officer. But sir, their armor is absorbing most of the damage. These ships are built like flying fortresses. That's when the human ships fired back. But they didn't fire conventional weapons. Instead, they launched hundreds of small objects, metal containers no bigger than cargo pods. What are those? Vex demanded. His science officer studied the readings. Unknown, sir. They appear to be simple metal containers. No energy signatures, no obvious weapon systems. The containers drifted closer to the Dominion fleet, moving slowly and silently through space. Several ship commanders requested permission to destroy them, but Vex was curious. What kind of weapon looked so harmless? The first container reached, the cruiser Eternal Victory. It attached itself to the hull with a soft magnetic clamp looking completely innocent. Then it exploded, but not with fire or energy. Instead, it released a cloud of gray dust that began eating through the ship's hull like acid. Within minutes, the outer armor was dissolving and the dust was spreading to nearby ships. What is that substance? Vex shouted. Unknown, sir. It appears to be some kind of corrosive agent. It's dissolving our hull materials at the molecular level. More containers reached other ships. Some exploded into clouds of metal fragments that punched through hulls like bullets. Others released sticky substances that jammed weapon systems and clogged engine intakes. The humans were using chemical weapons, something no civilized species had done in thousands of years. All ships, emergency washdown procedures, Vex ordered. Purge all external systems, but the human attack was just beginning. While the Dominion crews dealt with the chemical weapons, the human ships moved closer and launched their second surprise. Boarding pods. They looked like simple metal boxes with crude rocket motors attached. No shields, no fancy technology, just thick armor and a single purpose: to punch through enemy hulls and deliver human soldiers directly onto enemy ships. Sir, multiple hull breaches. The humans are boarding our ships. Vex watched in disbelief as dozens of boarding pods crashed into his fleet. They hit with such force that they buried themselves deep in the ship hulls, then opened like flowers to release their contents. Human soldiers poured out of the pods, armed with simple but deadly weapons. They moved through the ship corridors, like they had been born for this kind of fighting. On the cruiser Nightbringer, Captain Kex found himself facing human boarders in his own ship's corridors. The humans moved in small groups, covering each other with precision that spoke of years of practice. The leader, a scarred human with sergeant's stripes, kicked down a door and tossed something inside. The Dominion crew members in the room collapsed, overcome by some kind of gas. "Surrender now and you won't be hurt," the sergeant called out in perfect Dominion language. "Fight, and we'll have to do this the hard way." Captain Kex had never fought in hand-to-hand combat. Like most Dominion officers, he had relied on superior technology and overwhelming firepower. The idea of actually boarding an enemy ship and fighting room by room was barbaric, but it was also terrifyingly effective. Meanwhile, Commander Blake's flagship approached the Dominion command vessel. His ship was badly damaged, with hull breaches, venting atmosphere and one engine completely destroyed. "Sir," reported his first officer, "we're losing power. Hull integrity at 30%. We can't take much more punishment." Blake studied the tactical display. The battle was going better than expected, but they were still outnumbered 30-1. Traditional tactics wouldn't win this fight. "Set course for the Dominion flagship," he ordered. "Sir?" "You heard me. Ramming speed, and evacuate all non-essential personnel to the escape pods." The first officer stared at his commander. "Sir, that's suicide." Blake smiled grimly. "Son, sometimes suicide is just another tactic. Make sure the reactor is set for controlled overload on my command." The damaged human ship accelerated toward Vex's flagship, its engines pushing far beyond safe limits. Plasma fire from a dozen Dominion ships hammered the vessel, but it kept coming. "They're trying to ram us," shouted Vex's tactical officer. "Evasive maneuvers." But the massive Dominion flagship was too slow to avoid the smaller, more maneuverable human vessel. Blake's ship struck just below the main engine section, and both vessels locked together in a deadly embrace. "All hands, abandon ship," Blake ordered over the general comm. Then more quietly to his first officer, "Execute reactor overload in 60 seconds." The explosion that followed lit up half the system. Both ships disappeared in a ball of nuclear fire, but the blast wave from the detonation crippled 6 nearby Dominion vessels and scattered the fleet formation. General Voss, commanding the human ground forces, watched the sacrifice from his own ship and felt the familiar anger that had carried him through 20 years of warfare. "All boarding teams. This is Voss," he broadcast. "Commander Blake just gave his life for this mission. Make it count. Show them what happens when humans fight." The boarding actions intensified. Human soldiers moved through Dominion ships with a brutality that shocked their enemies. They used weapons that violated every rule of civilized warfare: explosive charges in confined spaces, chemical agents that burned through breathing apparatus, and tactics that seemed designed to cause maximum terror. But it wasn't random violence. Every human assault was carefully planned and executed with military precision. They targeted critical systems first: life support, weapons control, engine rooms. Within minutes of boarding, entire Dominion ships were helpless. The psychological effect was devastating. Dominion crews had never faced an enemy willing to die to win a battle. The idea of ramming attacks, suicide missions, and chemical weapons was completely alien to their military doctrine. As the battle continued, more human ships made desperate attacks. The destroyer Quick Strike rammed 2 Dominion cruisers, taking both vessels out of the fight. The frigate Home Guard detonated its weapon magazine while grappled to an enemy dreadnought, destroying both ships in the explosion. Of the 600 ships that had entered the Aurora system, fewer than 50 managed to escape. The human fleet was almost completely destroyed, but they had achieved the impossible, defeating a force 30 times their size. Admiral Vex, his uniform torn and his face bloody from a hull breach, sat in his emergency command pod and stared at the tactical display. The numbers didn't make sense. How could 18 human ships destroy his entire fleet? His communication officer, one of the few crew members still conscious, looked up from his station. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human colony." The screen showed Governor Kane, the same human who had warned them at Kepler. "Admiral Vex, I hope you're still alive to hear this. We told you we didn't want to fight. We warned you what would happen if you forced us to. Commander Blake and his people died because you wouldn't listen." Kane's expression was sad, not triumphant. "We've sent the same message to your Emperor. Stop this war now, before more people have to die. We don't enjoy killing, Admiral, but we're very, very good at it." As the transmission ended, Vex finally understood what the humans had been trying to tell them all along. This wasn't a species that had evolved past warfare. It was a species that had perfected it. And now the Dominion Empire was at war with an enemy that had been preparing for this fight for thousands of years. Emperor Thane stood alone in his private chamber. staring at the holographic display that showed the remains of his fleet. 600 ships reduced to wreckage, 12,000 of his finest warriors dead or captured. The largest military disaster in Dominion history. Behind him, the door chimed softly. General Mars entered, his face pale with defeat. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "The outer colonies they're declaring independence. The Zelons on Sector 7, the Krites in the mining systems. They've heard about Aurora. Emperor Thane didn't turn around." "How many?" 14 systems so far. More are considering it. They say if humans can defeat us, maybe they can too." The Emperor finally faced his general. His face showed an emotion his subjects had never seen before: fear. "We cannot appear weak," Thane said slowly. "If the Empire falls apart now, everything we've built will be lost. Everything my father built and his father before him." "What are your orders, Your Majesty?" Thane walked to his massive star map, showing the Dominion Empire in all its glory. Hundreds of systems, billions of subjects, the work of generations. "Mobilize everything," he said. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have. We attack their homeworld directly. If we destroy Earth, the humans will surrender." "General," Mars stepped back in shock. "Your Majesty, that would leave our own worlds defenseless. If we commit our entire military to one attack." "Then we better not lose," Thane interrupted. "Prepare the Grand Fleet, every available ship. We end this war with one decisive battle." 3 weeks later, the largest armada in galactic history assembled at the edge of the Sol system. Over 2,000 Dominion warships representing the entire military might of the Empire. Dreadnoughts that could crack planets, carriers filled with fighter craft, battleships armed with weapons that could destroy moons. Emperor Thane commanded the fleet personally from his massive flagship, the pride of Empire. He had never lost a battle in his 40 years of rule. Today he would crush the humans and restore his empire's reputation. "All fleet commanders, report readiness," he commanded. The responses came back quickly. 2,047 ships ready for battle, the most powerful military force ever assembled. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "our scouts confirm that Earth has significant orbital defenses, defense platforms, weapon satellites, mining stations converted to military use." "How many ships are defending the system?" Thane asked. "Approximately 300, Your Majesty. But sir, they appear to be civilian vessels that have been armed. Cargo ships, passenger liners, even old mining barges." Thane smiled for the first time in weeks. 300 civilian ships against our Grand Fleet? This will be over quickly. What the scouts didn't report was what they couldn't see. Hidden in the asteroid belt, disguised as mining equipment, were weapon systems the humans had been building for decades. Every major asteroid had been hollowed out and turned into a fortress. The moon itself was one giant military base. Admiral Cross stood in the Defense Command Center buried deep under the surface of Luna. Around her, hundreds of technicians worked at control stations, coordinating the defense of humanity's home system. "Ma'am," reported her tactical officer, "the Dominion fleet is entering the outer system. 2,000 ships confirmed." Cross nodded calmly. She was 70 years old, a veteran of every major human conflict in the past 50 years. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion, the Belt Wars, and the Jupiter Campaign. Today would be her greatest challenge. "Send the final warning," she ordered. The transmission went out on all frequencies, reaching every ship in the Dominion fleet. "This is Admiral Cross of Earth Defense Command. You are entering the Sol system without permission. You have one chance: to turn around and leave. We don't want to fight you, but if you force us to, you won't survive it." On his flagship, Emperor Thane listened to the warning and laughed. "One old woman thinks she can stop the Grand Fleet? Begin the attack." The Dominion Armada moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons charging and shields at maximum power. It was a sight that should have terrified any defender. But the humans had learned something during their long history of warfare. Sometimes, the best defense is letting your enemy come to you. The first sign that something was wrong came when the fleet reached the outer asteroid belt. What looked like simple mining equipment suddenly began moving, revealing massive weapon systems hidden in the rocks. "Sir, the asteroids are firing on us," shouted the tactical officer. Railgun batteries that had been disguised as mining extractors opened fire, launching projectiles the size of buildings at incredible speeds. The lead Dominion ships, expecting to face only the small human fleet, found themselves under attack from every direction. The battleship Eternal Glory took a direct hit from an asteroid-mounted weapon and broke in half. The cruiser Star Destroyer simply vanished when a projectile traveling at 90% of light speed passed through its center. "Evasive maneuvers," Thane ordered. "Return fire on those asteroids." But there were thousands of asteroids, and hundreds of them had been turned into weapon platforms. Every time the Dominion fleet destroyed one, two more revealed themselves and opened fire. Meanwhile, the human defense fleet moved into position. Admiral Cross had learned from the battles at Kepler and Aurora. She knew the Dominion ships were vulnerable to kinetic weapons and boarding actions. "All ships, implement Plan Omega," she broadcast. "Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every species that tried to resist the Dominion and failed." The human ships attacked in a way that made no sense to traditional military thinking. Civilian cargo vessels rammed military dreadnoughts. Passenger liners loaded with explosive charges became guided missiles. Even the old space tugs joined the fight, using their powerful engines to push Dominion ships into each other. Captain West commanded a converted passenger liner called the New York. His ship had been a luxury cruise vessel just months ago. Now, it was loaded with nuclear warheads and heading straight for a Dominion carrier. "All hands abandon ship," he ordered calmly. "This is our stop." The New York struck the carrier amidships and detonated, taking both vessels and creating an explosion that could be seen from Mars. But the most shocking surprise came from the moon itself. The entire lunar surface opened up like a flower, revealing massive magnetic accelerators that had been built into the moon's core. These weren't ship-mounted railguns. These were planetary weapons capable of launching projectiles across the entire solar system at speeds that approached light itself. The first shot from Luna Base 1 crossed the system in 8 minutes and struck Emperor Thane's flagship directly. The Pride of Empire, largest ship in the Dominion fleet, was cut in half by a projectile, traveling so fast it appeared to teleport. "Impossible," Thane screamed as his ship broke apart around him. "How can primitives have such weapons?" His science officer, thrown to the deck by the impact, looked up with blood running down his face. "Your Majesty, those aren't primitive weapons. They're using the moon's mass as a weapon platform. They've turned their entire planet into a fortress." More shots came from the lunar surface. Each one destroyed multiple ships as the projectiles passed through the Dominion formation like bullets through paper. But even worse than the big weapons were the small ones. Human children evacuated to Mars for safety had recorded messages for the defenders. The messages were broadcast throughout the battle. "Give them hell, Dad," came a young voice over the comm. "Show them what happens when they mess with humans." Another child's voice. "Mom, I know you're scared, but remember what you taught me. Sometimes you have to fight bullies or they never stop." The psychological effect on the Dominion forces was devastating. These humans were so committed to war that even their children understood and supported it. What kind of species raised their young to think about battle? General Voss, now commanding ground forces aboard converted civilian ships, led boarding actions that were even more brutal than those at Aurora. His soldiers moved through Dominion vessels like they were born for ship-to-ship combat. "Remember," he told his troops over the comm, "they came to our home. They wanted to destroy Earth. Show them what that kind of mistake costs." The boarding actions were swift and merciless. Human soldiers used every dirty trick learned in centuries of warfare against each other. Gas attacks, explosive charges, even trained attack dogs bred for zero-gravity combat. As the battle continued, the Dominion fleet fell apart. Ships tried to retreat but found their escape routes blocked by more asteroids' weapons. The few vessels that made it to the edge of the system were hunted down by fast human interceptors. Emperor Thane, rescued from his destroyed flagship, found himself aboard a damaged cruiser watching his empire's death. "Your Majesty," his communication officer reported, "we're receiving messages from home. The subject species are declaring independence. The K. Outer colonies are in open revolt. Our government is collapsing. Thane stared at the tactical display showing the wreckage of his grand fleet. Of over 2,000 ships, fewer than 100 were still functional. A new transmission came in from Earth. Admiral Cross appeared on the screen, her uniform neat and her expression calm. Emperor Thane, if you're still alive, this is your final warning. Surrender now and we'll treat your surviving crews with respect. Continue fighting and we'll hunt down every Dominion ship in the galaxy. She paused, looking directly at the camera. We told you to stop. We warned you what would happen. This is what happens when you force humans to fight. As the transmission ended, Thane finally understood what his empire had awakened. Not just another species to conquer, but a race of warriors who had spent their entire history learning how to destroy their enemies completely. The Dominion Empire, built over centuries of conquest, was ending in a single day. And it was ending because they had refused to listen to a simple warning: leave humans alone. The neutral space station Harmony Point had seen many diplomatic meetings, but never one like this. Representatives from dozens of species filled the great assembly hall, all watching as Emperor Thane was led to the defendant's chair. The once mighty ruler of the Dominion Empire looked small and broken. His imperial robes had been replaced with simple prisoner clothes. His crown was gone, his empire scattered to the winds. Around him sat his surviving generals and admirals, all awaiting judgment. Ambassador Reed stood at the prosecutor's table, holding a datapad filled with evidence. Beside her sat Captain Torres, recently freed from Dominion custody, and Admiral Cross, still wearing her battle-scarred uniform from the defense of Earth. Judge Kane, a neutral zone arbiter who had overseen peace negotiations for 3 centuries, called the session to order. This tribunal will determine responsibility for the Dominion-Human War and establish terms for lasting peace, he announced. Emperor Thane, you stand accused of unprovoked aggression against peaceful human colonies. How do you respond? Thane raised his head slowly. I did what any emperor would do. I expanded my empire. It's what empires do. Ambassador Reed stepped forward. Your Honor, may I present evidence to the court? She activated her datapad, and holographic displays filled the room. The first image showed a peaceful human colony on a distant world. This is New Haven Colony on Kepler 442b, Reed explained. Population, 15,000 civilians. They farmed, they built homes, they raised families. They had no military ambitions, no desire to conquer anyone. The display changed to show Admiral Vex's fleet arriving at the colony. When Dominion forces arrived, Governor Kane offered peaceful coexistence. He warned Admiral Vex that attacking the colony would lead to consequences. The Admiral ignored this warning. More images appeared. The battle at Kepler, the destruction of Dominion ships, the desperate retreat. After this defeat, we sent more warnings, Reed continued. We offered trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, cultural exchanges. We begged the Dominion to choose peace over war. Emperor Thane shifted uncomfortably in his chair. You were primitives, dangerous primitives. We had to protect civilized space from your violence. Protect? Captain Torres stood up from the witness. Your Honor, may I address the court? Judge Kane nodded. You may speak, Captain. Torres walked to the center of the room, her scarred face showing the wounds of battle. Protect civilized space from us? She said, looking directly at Thane. Let me tell you about protection, Your Majesty. Before your empire found us, we sent diplomatic messages to 46 species. Every single one of them rejected our offers of friendship. The holographic display changed to show communication logs, hundreds of messages sent by human diplomats to various alien species. The Zelons said we were too violent. The Krites called us warlike savages. The Benthari refused to even respond to our messages. Every species in this galaxy turned their backs on us because they thought we were dangerous. Torres paused, letting her words sink in. Then you conquered them anyway. Every single species that rejected human friendship fell to Dominion forces within 50 years. Where was their civilized protection then? Murmurs spread through the assembly hall. Many of the representatives were from species that had been conquered by the Dominion. Dr. Hayes, a human anthropologist, was called to the witness stand. She was a small, elderly woman who spoke with quiet authority. "Your Honor," she began, "I've studied human warfare for 60 years. I want to explain something that I think this court needs to understand." She gestured to a display showing human history. Battles, wars, conflicts spanning thousands of years. Humans are not naturally more violent than other species. We're not born wanting to fight. But we're the only species in known space that developed spaceflight while still at war with ourselves. The display showed images of human wars throughout history. Ancient battles with swords, modern conflicts with advanced weapons, space battles between human factions. Every other species achieved peace within their own kind before reaching the stars. They developed diplomacy, cooperation, advanced technology for exploration and trade. Humans had to develop technology for survival against other humans. She turned to face Emperor Thane directly. "When you threatened our colonies, you weren't facing a species that had forgotten how to fight. You were facing a species that had never stopped learning how to fight. Every human weapon, every tactic, every strategy was tested in real combat against other humans first." Dr. Hayes returned to her seat as Ambassador Reed called the final witness. "Your Honor, I call Commander Blake's daughter, Lisa Blake, to the stand." A young woman in her 20s walked to the witness chair. She was the daughter of the commander who had sacrificed his ship at Aurora. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "My father didn't want to die," she said quietly. "None of our people wanted to die. But when someone threatens your home, threatens your family, you fight. That's what humans do." She looked around the assembly hall at all the alien representatives. "My dad sent 47 warnings to 47 different species, offering friendship and alliance. You all said no. Then this empire conquered you anyway, just like we warned you they would." Her voice grew stronger. "My father died protecting people who had rejected his friendship. He died protecting species that called him a savage. He did it because it was right, not because anyone thanked him for it." The young woman wiped her eyes. "We don't want to be the galaxy's warriors. We don't want to be the ones everyone calls when there's fighting to be done. We just want to live in peace. But if someone forces us to fight, we're going to win." The tribunal fell silent. Judge Kane reviewed his notes before speaking. "Emperor Thane, the evidence shows that humans repeatedly attempted peaceful contact with your empire. They warned you of the consequences of aggression. They offered alternatives to war. You chose to ignore these warnings and attack their colonies." Thane's voice was barely a whisper. I thought we were stronger." "Your mistake," Judge Kane replied, "was not understanding what strength means to humans. You saw their weapons and ships and thought them primitive. You didn't understand that humans have been fighting for survival for their entire existence." Judge stood to deliver his verdict. "This tribunal finds the Dominion Empire guilty of unprovoked aggression. Emperor Thane, you are sentenced to exile on a neutral world where you will study human history and diplomacy until you understand why this war was unnecessary." He turned to address the full assembly. "The Dominion Empire is hereby dissolved. All conquered species are granted immediate independence. Reparations will be paid to worlds damaged during Dominion expansion." Then Judge Kane looked directly at the human delegation. "However, this tribunal also recognizes that a new order must emerge from the chaos. The humans have proven they can defend themselves and others. We ask them to consider a new role, not as conquerors but as protectors." Ambassador Reed stood slowly. "Your Honor, humans have no desire to rule other species. But if any world faces unprovoked aggression, if any species needs protection from those who would conquer them, we will answer that call." She paused, looking around the room at representatives of dozens of species. "We hope that next time when humans offer friendship, more species will say yes. We hope that next time we won't have to fight alone." 3 months later, a memorial was dedicated on Earth. It listed every Dominion soldier who had died in the war, not just the humans, but their enemies as well. The inscription read, "They were warned. We remember them anyway. May we never have to warn anyone again." Captain Torres, now promoted to admiral, stood before the memorial with a group of young cadets from various species, the first class of the new Galactic Defense Academy. "What's the most important lesson of this war?" she asked them. A young Zalon raised his hand. "That humans are good fighters?" Torres shook her head. "No, the most important lesson is that we tried 47 times to avoid this war. We offered friendship, trade, alliance, protection. We warned everyone what would happen if they forced us to fight." She looked at each of the young cadets, humans, Zelons, Krites, even a few former Dominion species. "War should always be the last choice, never the first. But when someone threatens innocent people, when someone refuses to listen to warnings, when someone chooses conquest over cooperation..." She paused, letting them think. "Then you do what humans have always done. You fight to win, and you protect those who can't protect themselves." As the sun set over the memorial, Torres wondered if the galaxy had finally learned the lesson that humans had been trying to teach for so long. That peace is precious precisely because it's so hard to achieve, and that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be ready for war. The warnings had been sent, the lessons had been learned. Perhaps next time someone would listen.